We begin.
There's a faraway land so
Lawrence of Arabia wrote, "All people dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous, for they may act on their dreams with open eyes to make them possible." The opening hymn is number 145, "As Tranquil Streams."
Please join me in the words of our unison affirmation printed in the order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You may be seated. Good morning. Welcome to new visitors and to old friends. We're very excited today to have Doug Mooter preaching our sermon, and I'm very excited. This is a UU church, which means we celebrate our shared values together here, such as celebrating diversity, creativity, free thought, responsible action, and social and environmental justice, among other things. Please join us after the service in the common room for a little celebration of our new members. There will be lots of cake, and it should be really good. If you're new here and you'd like to keep in touch, there are blue cards on the back of the pew in front of you that you can fill out. And if you stop by the welcome table on your way to the common room, there's some more information about what we do here. There are some announcements in the back of the order of service that I'd like to draw your attention to. Let's see. Today at 3 p.m., the Music Committee is presenting Opera Delights. And if you want more information about that, you can talk to Brad, but that promises to be very good. And the deadline for auction donations has been extended, so if you have something you'd like to donate to the auction, either to the auction itself or to the silent auction, please get in touch with someone who's organizing the auction because they would love to have some more donations. All right, thank you very much.
I talk about this book a bunch, and I don't know how many people have ever had the chance to leaf through it. It's our membership book. This particular one was started in 1893, and I think people just had better handwriting back then. It looks really neat. There's some typed stuff beginning in 1916, but back here, those people who are sitting up there in the Blinn and the Bacon Room. Those are real people that signed this book at one time or another. And hey, if you stick around long enough, maybe we'll name something after you too. In the back of it is a long list of people who have become members at one time or another. Lots of people who are here thought really hard about whether or not to become a member. It means that you felt ready to make this place the place you call your spiritual home, that you're ready to receive and give back to beloved community that we make and envision and dream about and create together. And we are going to share in the welcoming of new members this morning. There are 5 new members. Some folks were here at the 9. We'll read all their names, and you'll have to hear the one who didn't make the order of service because it had already gone to print. And he said, yes. And I said, hold the presses. And it's okay. He's here. He's a member. It's all good. Here in this church, human beings have gathered for centuries seeking a higher purpose and deeper life than they could find alone. We are grateful today for each one of you that you have found your way here and that you have decided to make a commitment to this faith community. We hope that as a member of this church, you will allow yourselves to know and to be known, to minister to and to be ministered unto, to love and to be loved by this congregation. We never really know what combination of fate and friendship and good luck it is that brings certain people together in this world for any purpose. But we believe that membership in the church calls each of us here to celebrate the fate that has drawn us together and to regard each one as a spiritual friend and a potential teacher, even of occasional hard lessons. The relationships we form in our church are based on needs of the soul, needs that render each of us vulnerable and therefore reliant on each other's grace and goodness and generosity of spirit. As members of this church, we pledge to be guardians of each other's spirits, to respect the ultimate privacy of each one's human struggle, and to believe in each one's inherent dignity. Finally, as members of this congregation, we know that we can always rely on the wisdom of our covenant, which we just read together this morning, which reminds us of our true purpose in being together. Those who have recently signed the membership book are welcome to come on forward. I know there's 3 of you in the room. Unless you ran off, well, come on forward. That's good. And let's have our parish clerk, Rebecca Green. You come on up here with me and stand here, turn around so everyone can see you. We are so glad that you're here among us, and that's your part.
Friends, you have joined a free church, a church with a proud heritage. No creed will bind your heart or mind. Live and speak as freely as you are able, with charity, integrity, and courage.
And everyone else, please rise and share with me in saying the words printed on the inside of our order of service. We welcome you into our liberal religious community. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Let us worship together in such affection that our differences strengthen one another. So be it. And we can give you some flowers. It looks like more than one this morning. That's great. And a little chalice pin. And I encourage you to wear it anywhere prominently to show that you feel a part of this beloved community, and it represents liberty, truth, freedom, justice in our world. Today, welcome. We are so glad to call you our members. Let's give them a warm welcome. And this is Becca, and this is Shelby, and this is Don McIver. Don McIver, welcome. Shelby Morrow, welcome. Becca Morrow, welcome. And it looks like our young people are going to, you can have a seat. Thank you. As they sit, young people are going to exit for in-gathering and their teachers, and we are all going to sing hymn number 318, We Would Be One. And this is a great hymn. It was created by the youth movements of the Unitarian and the Universalist youth groups when they merged in the 50s, a little ahead of our denomination in 1961.
Good morning. I'm Mercedes Kane, and I'm a member of the lay pastoral team. And this is the time during the service we invite you to come and share a joy or concern. Please be brief and use the mic. Thank you. This last candle for all the joys and concerns we hold deep in our hearts. I'll be here at the candle stand afterwards if you'd care to light a private candle. Thank you.
John Dietrich was known as the father of Unitarian humanism, and he was not a man to mince words. This is from his 1930 sermon, The Folly of Halfway Liberalism. The modern liberal is constantly telling us that things are both this and that, instead of either this or that. Would that our modern liberal would take the bull by the horns and grapple decisively with that tremendous either-or. Either the things of which religion speaks are realities, or they are illusions. If they are realities, let us embrace them. If they are illusions, let us dismiss them. But the second reading has more of the both-and approach that Dietrich rejected. On the blog Ordinary Times, Kyle Cupp posted, "How My Daughter Taught Me to Love Myth-Making." Today, my daughter would have been 4 years old. Though Vivian is no longer with us, we will celebrate her birthday this evening, lighting a candle and, in its glow, dine and sing and share her story. We'll do all this in memory of her. Her older brother, now 7, has a few memories and mementos. Her younger sister knows her only by our pictures, treasured keepsakes, and our words. My wife and I contemplate her life as best we can with what we have left to us. This is our ritual, our tradition, our own little family myth-making. It is how we, in an ever-new present, give meaning to a life lived in an ever more distant past. It's how we bridge the distance. It's how we devote ourselves to someone now with us only in memory. Vivian breathed, cooed, and gave one loud cry when she was first carried through the cold hospital air. Not what I'd usually call major life accomplishments, but they were hers and about all she did. My own achievements seem insignificantly small next to the movements of the planets and the stars. If I can think the world of anyone's small steps, I can think the world of hers. What is the meaning of her life? What is the meaning of my own? I've come to believe that these are not questions with answers out there, discoverable only if I search long enough, but questions I am called to answer creatively in my own small way, responding to the past from where I happen to be in the present moment, and making something new for the future. Vivian won't be present for her party, so we will have to make her present. Now, in a few minutes, I am going to explain the extent to which both First Parish and the little pieces of paper in your wallet are products of imagination. This is the part of the service where we give you an opportunity to bring those two together. The offering will now be collected. girl once asked me, "Don't grown-ups like to use their imaginations?" Hidden in that question was a judgment and an accusation. At the time, we had just landed on a distant planet, and we had a mission that I kept losing track of. Her younger brother had a lot to add to the shared fantasy, but I could barely keep up. Why was I so dull, so unimaginative, so grown up? That question stuck with me for months, especially when I was with children, and eventually an answer came to me. The adult imagination is every bit as vigorous as the child's, and we live surrounded by imaginary things. But rather than take credit for the things we imagine, we insist that they are real. Much of a child's education consists of learning to see what adults see, things that, strictly speaking, are not there. We see danger in streets that at the moment have no traffic. We see property lines and invisible connections between objects and their owners. When the living room floor is cluttered, we see not just where things are, but also where they belong, and the system of organization that wants to pull them back into place. We see not just where we are in a room, but also where we are on the map and in the schedule and on the org chart. The left side of the highway looks physically different to us than the right side. Kids don't see any of that stuff until we teach them, because it's not real. A few years ago, I was in London with the LaFrance Lindens. Jojo was 10 at the time and Tommy 7. And when they knew where we were going, they loved to run ahead, which got kind of scary in underground stations. The boys would thread their way through a crowd by racing up to within an inch of somebody and then changing direction at the last instant, like a halfback avoiding a linebacker. It was nerve-wracking to watch, but they never ran into anybody. And so it was hard to explain why they should slow down. Eventually, I realized that they simply did not see what I saw. I saw a bubble of personal space surrounding each person. And so I saw the boys violently bashing their bubbles against other people's bubbles. But they didn't see that because those bubbles are imaginary. In some theories of physics, actual particles are surrounded by clouds of virtual particles, which probably aren't there, but they could be, and somehow all that possibility needs to be accounted for. Similarly, in the adult world, actual events are surrounded by clouds of virtual events, things that haven't happened and maybe never will, but could. So a child will set a glass of orange juice on the edge of a table and go on playing. But any adult who looks at that glass will instantly see all the ways it could be knocked off. It's as if the real glass were surrounded by a cloud of virtual orange juice glasses that have already toppled to the floor and broken. We see those virtual glasses, but the children don't, because they're not really there. Some days a virtual event is the most striking thing that happens. Say you're walking beside the great road holding a child's hand, but your grip gets sweaty. She slips away, darts out into traffic, and in just a second or two is on the opposite sidewalk, perfectly safe. A couple of cars screech to a halt, but no real harm was done. Now, the girl will probably not think twice about that incident because she experienced only what really happened. But you saw all the virtual cars that didn't stop in time and all the virtual little girls who were injured or maybe even killed. That's what leaves you shaking, and what will come back to you in the middle of the night, not the real event, but the one you saw in your imagination. Like children, we adults make our fantasies more elaborate and stable by sharing them with others. A shared fantasy can seem to have an external reality because even if it slips your mind, other people can keep it going and pull you back in. But I like to run what I call the amnesia test. Test something's reality by asking whether it would still exist if we all forgot about it at the same time. For example, if one night we all forgot about the sun, I'm pretty confident we'd rediscover it in the morning. And if we all forgot about gravity, I think it would regain our attention fairly quickly. But on the other hand, if everyone simultaneously forgot that paper money has value, then it wouldn't. Real as it may seem sometimes, money is an act of shared imagination. So are laws. If we all simultaneously forgot the laws, there wouldn't be any. It's our shared imagination that holds that system together. Communities also fail the amnesia test. If I forgot about this church, I hope the rest of you would pull me back. Where have you been, you might say? We miss you. Or I might do the same for you. But if we all forgot at the same time, First Parish would just be gone. Because the fundamental place this church exists isn't in this building or in the legal structure of the bylaws, but in our imaginations. So if the new members wonder exactly what it is they've signed up for, this is my answer. You've joined our shared fantasy. And we hope that you'll lend the power of your imagination to the task of making this community as real as money or law. Now, many of our social and cultural inventions serve some kind of purpose, so even if everybody forgot about them, they might eventually get replaced by something similar. Eventually, there could be new communities and new laws and new economies that had some kind of currency. But I don't believe those amnesiac people would rediscover the inherent worth of dollar bills or of driving on the right, because the value of those things is fundamentally imaginary. But what would happen to the objects of religion? What would happen to God or the afterlife or souls? If everyone simultaneously forgot about those things, would they be gone? Or are they as real as the sun or gravity so that we would have to rediscover them? Now, reasonable people disagree about this, but personally, I believe that religion would be like law or money. New religions might develop, but the specifics of current religions, the theologies and cosmologies, the visions of heaven and hell, and the plans of salvation that would get us to one or the other, I believe those things would be gone because they're products of imagination. Now, for people who share my opinion, it's easy to stop the thought experiment there and congratulate ourselves on how realistic we are. Jehovah and Allah and Zeus are imaginary. We don't believe in them. Aren't we smart? That self-congratulation is what I hear when atheists like Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins compare God to the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy. But here's my problem with that. It isn't just other people's God-based religions that fail the amnesia test. My own humanistic religion fails it too. What would happen to, say, human rights if we all forgot about them? I think they'd be gone. Look at that list of Unitarian Universalist principles at the front of the hymnal. What would happen to the inherent worth and dignity of every person if we all stopped imagining it? What would happen to the right of conscience or the goal of world community? What would happen to the interdependent web of all existence? What would happen to something as venerable and glorious as justice itself? I think those things would be gone. These things are not truths. They're visions, and they exist because we imagine them. And so that is another thing I believe you commit yourself to when you become a Unitarian Universalist. We're not asking you to commit yourself to believing in the truth of the principles, the way the Christians commit themselves to the Apostles' Creed. We're asking you to commit your imagination to envisioning the principles, to live as if everyone had worth and dignity, as if we were all part of an interdependent web, as if justice and equity and compassion were as real as property or the banking system. So where am I going with this? My point is that John Dietrich's either-or question is the wrong one. It sets us up to keep having the wrong argument about religion, arguments that go round and round without convincing anyone. On one side, fundamentalists tell us that the objects of their religion, God and heaven and so on, are as real as the sun or gravity, and so they are important and deserve respect. On the other side, atheists tell us that the objects of religion are imaginary, like the Easter Bunny, and so they are unimportant and deserve scorn. But what the amnesia test teaches me is that if God and the afterlife are imaginary, they do have something in common with the Easter Bunny, but they also have something in common with justice and human rights. Just because something comes from the human imagination doesn't mean that it isn't also important and deserving of respect. The discussion we ought to be having is not whether the objects of religion are real, as if we ourselves stand in an unembellished reality and can reject the products of imagination whenever they invade our rock-solid realm. No, the discussion we ought to be having is why human beings have imagined these things, what we are trying to accomplish by imagining them, and which imaginative products best fulfill those purposes. So, for example, when my father was dying, he used his imagination to envision a way that his life story might continue past his physical death. He imagined that he had a soul, and that when he died, his soul would live on in heaven, a place where the souls of the dead go, where his wife and parents already were, and where his children might join him someday. I didn't and don't believe in this vision. But that's not because I stand firmly in rock-solid reality and dismiss all imaginary things. I also use my imagination to envision my life as part of a story that does not end when my body dies. I do this by identifying with causes larger than myself, and by imagining connections between myself and the people who will carry on those struggles after me. Tom Joad is doing something similar in The Grapes of Wrath when he says, "Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. I'll be in the way guys yell when they're mad. I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and know that supper's ready. And when people are eating the stuff they raise and living in the houses they build, I'll be there too." That's vision, that's imagination. Humanists do it too. Now, once you've had that realization, it's tempting to go relativistic, to say, well, I imagine things, you imagine things, it's all the same. But my point is different. Once we give up the pretense that our religion is realistic while their religion is fantasy, once we realize how important imagination is to everybody, then we're in a position to talk about the right issue, the difference between good imagination and bad imagination. The reading about the birthday party for the girl who died in infancy is another example of this middle position. A fundamentalist might claim that Kyle Cupp's family ritual speaks to a real soul in a real heaven. An atheist might counter that souls are not real, so there's no point trying to make Vivian present on her birthday. She's dead, so she's not present, and that's that. But Cupp himself takes a more subtle view. He recognizes that Vivian's presence is imaginary, but her imaginary presence is precisely the point. Without such a ritual, his ability to imagine Vivian would fade, and part of the meaning of his life would be gone. His ritual addresses a question whose answer is not out there, but one that he feels called to answer creatively in my own small way. Now, I don't think I can finish this talk without confessing just how far I've been willing to take these ideas in my own life. For a few years in the 80s and 90s, I had what should have been my ideal job as a mathematician. I made an industry-level salary, and I had an almost academic level of freedom to research whatever interested me. And I thought I should be deliriously happy with this, but I wasn't, and I wondered why. So I asked myself, what's the difference between a good work day and a bad work day? And the answer popped right into my head. On a good day, I was motivated by a pure spirit of inquiry. I had questions I wanted to answer, so I just sat down and worked on them. But on a bad day, I fretted about all the usual office stuff, reviews and funding and promotions and whatnot. And the spirit of inquiry got lost. And then I listened to what I had just said. The spirit of inquiry. Sure, it was a metaphor, a figure of speech. But the metaphor captured something for me. What my job had on its good days and lacked on its bad days was a reverent attitude of service. On my good days, my work was a kind of worship. So I went with that. I created a one-man religion devoted to the spirit of inquiry. I drew a symbol for my religion on a big piece of paper and I taped it to my desktop. All day long it was covered by my desk pad, so only I knew it was there. And when it was time to go home, I put my desk pad aside, looked at the symbol, and asked how well I had served the spirit of inquiry that day. And then, whatever the answer, I would reverently put the 4 tools of my research, compass, calculator, ruler, and pencil, in their appropriate places on the symbol. The next morning, the symbol would be the first thing I saw when I came in. I would reverently ask the blessing of the Spirit, remove my tools, replace my desk pad, and begin my day. I did that for years, as long as I had that job. And from those years of religious practice, I can report this about the worship of the spirit of inquiry. It worked. I became happier, saner, and more focused on what was important to me. And the Spirit never got out of hand. It never demanded sacrifices or made me its prophet or condemned my coworkers to hell. Now, a hardline atheist might scornfully tell me that the spirit of inquiry is not real. I didn't work in the presence of divinity. I just had an imaginary friend. And in response, I suppose I could turn fundamentalist and argue for the Spirit's reality. And if I were stubborn enough, that argument could go round and round the way religious arguments do. Or I could accept the content of the criticism and reject the scorn it carries. The Spirit isn't real the way rocks and tables are real. It was a projection of my unconscious. I did have an imaginary friend. So? If we make that shift, if we stop arguing about whether the objects of religion are real, and instead think about why we might imagine them and how well they serve the purposes we need them to serve, that opens up a whole new conversation. Instead of questioning whether someone's God is real, let's talk about what is accomplished by envisioning that God. If God is the organizing principle of someone's life, what kind of life does God organize? Is it a life of compassion and generosity, or of self-centeredness and self-righteousness? Do worshipers open up to mystery and wonder, or embrace small-minded arrogance? Are they filled with awe and gratitude, or with a sense of special entitlement? Does a vision of the afterlife help people accept death, or fill them with guilt and anxiety? Does it give them the confidence to live more fully, or does it freeze them into inaction and procrastination? And as I think we all know, it can go either way. In religion, as anywhere else, the power of imagination can be used wisely or unwisely. And once we recognize that, we face the challenge laid down by the philosopher Stan Lee. With great power comes great responsibility. If we tell ourselves that we just believe what is real, we're not just fooling ourselves, we're letting ourselves off the hook. Because reality can take care of itself, but visions need our participation. If justice is a vision, then it's not enough to passively believe in it. We need to make it real. We need to practice envisioning justice so that it will always be present to us and not wink out when we need it most. If the inherent worth of each person and the interconnected web of all existence are visions rather than facts, then we need to invoke those visions, experience them, and pass them on to others. And if a community like First Parish exists primarily in our imaginations, then we need to do more than just join and attend or even contribute. We also need to share our visions of what this community is and what it means and what it could be. A church is a vessel for shared imagination. So if we're not regularly filling that vessel and then drinking from it when our personal visions falter, we're missing the point. But on the other hand, we could be asking ourselves what kinds of visions we need and what kinds of visions the world needs. We could commit ourselves to that envisioning process and do it together, pooling our imaginative power to resist the cynical and nihilistic forces of the larger culture. And if we did that, then, I believe, we would truly be using our imaginations like grown-ups. The closing hymn is number 114, Forward Through the Ages. going to do, is this on? Okay. We're going to do the closing words responsively based on reading 657 in the hymnal. It Matters What We Believe by Sophia Lyons-Foss, 657 in the hymnal. But I want to toss in a wrinkle. We're going to rewrite it on the fly into It Matters What We Imagine. And the way we're going to do it is whenever you run into the word beliefs, change it to visions. I think you'll catch on once you hear me do it in the first line. It matters what we imagine. Some visions are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other visions are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some visions are like shadows clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities. Other visions are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some visions are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Other visions are bonds in the rural community, where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some visions are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Other visions are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some visions weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Other visions nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some visions are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world.